Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining our Protests and Town Halls Now What webinar presented by Chase. Today's webinar is a part of the Beyond 28 campaign, which will continue to recognize, honor, and celebrate Black history throughout the month of February and, of course, beyond. My name is Zena Keita, and I am the sideline reporter for the Santa Cruz Warriors, and I'm so excited for today's conversation, not only with who we'll be talking to, what we'll be talking about, but also who we will be talking to, as our audience members are consisting of my favorite people, the youth, middle schoolers and high schoolers, as well as some of the members of our community. Today, we are extending a bigger conversation that took hold of our country and our communities in 2020. After the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, amongst others during that time period, an international calling for the protection of Black lives was sparked all around the world. And protests and town halls started sweeping our nations, calling for hard conversations around what we can do to care and treat for our neighbors, particularly those that are of color. As an organization, the Golden State Warriors and Santa Cruz Warriors want to continue to have this conversation, and that is why we are here today, to have a proactive role in racial equity. Now, I do want to preface this conversation by saying, when we say, now what, we aren't saying that protests and town halls are to be done with, or that the reasons why we had them in the first place are now gone. We're saying now what to say, what can we do now that we've had them, and now that we know that these reasons are still alive today? What conversations can we be having within our homes, with our friends, with our classmates, with our teachers, within our communities, to try and raise the level of empathy and understanding within each other to hopefully diminish and hopefully one day extinguish the need for town halls and protests altogether. So today we're going to talk about microaggressions, we're going to talk about stereotypes, we're going to talk about racial and gender discrimination, and we're going to talk about the Black experience overall. And we want to inspire the young people on this call, this young generation that we know, to be incredibly vocal and to be incredibly passionate, to stay engaged, right? Protests and town halls, now what? We want you guys to remain engaged and to help build a better community for us all to live within by recognizing our cultural differences and also cultural racism. To join me in this conversation, I have some amazing voices within the world of sports, as well as within the world of Warriors and our partners. First up is Mike Brown. Mike Brown currently serves as our associate head coach of the Golden State Warriors. He was formerly the NBA Coach of the Year with the Cleveland Cavs and is a three-time NBA champion as an assistant coach, first with the Spurs and then 2 times with the Warriors. Welcome, Coach Brown. We are so happy to have you here.
Thanks, Zena. It's good to be here, so appreciate you.
Of course. Next up, we have one of my personal favorites. It's funny because she's a year younger than me, but I feel like I grew up watching her play basketball and wanting to be like her. Chiney Ogwumike, 2-time WNBA All-Star for the Los Angeles Sparks and currently an ESPN NBA analyst. She was the 2014 WNBA Rookie of the Year and a former #1 overall pick for the WNBA draft in 2012. Chiney Ogwumike, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. And last but not least, Lisa Stevens. She is currently the Vice President and Senior Business Consultant at JP Morgan Chase & Company. She's actually been very instrumental in helping support minority entrepreneurs through her work at Chase, including assisting in the execution of Chase's $30 billion initiative that was announced right after the happenings in 2020 to help provide racial equity and provide economic opportunity. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part.
Of course. So now that we have our amazing panelists here and we can get this conversation started, I want to first reflect. I think when we're talking about the Black experience, it's important to set some context. And all of us being Black Americans here on this call can definitely speak to experiences that we've had. So I would like to ask everyone, and Mike, you can start with us here. What was your first experience or memory with racism?
Yeah, so I grew up basically on a military base. My dad was in the Air Force for many years. My dad was in the Air Force for 26 years. My mom was an American school teacher on base. And so, you know, it was almost like in a bubble growing up when it came to racism. But when I got in high school and 10th grade. It was the first time that I realized, and I'm sure when I was younger, it probably happened to me, but I just didn't think about it, or it didn't hit home like this particular incident that I'm about to tell you guys about did. But I was dating a girl who was Hispanic. So her mom was Hispanic and her dad was white. And, her mom, even though she was Hispanic and looked Hispanic, she dyed her hair blonde, and she tried to act a certain way. And I never forget, because I had heard that this girl, her parents didn't really want her dating anybody except for somebody else that was white. And here we are, I'm dating her. And I was over the house one day, and the mom came into me and she goes, you know what? I'm okay with you dating Kathy because you're different. And, I used to wear the polo shirt and the topsiders, and so she goes, and you dress white, and you carry yourself well. And so
Wow.
I'm good with it. And I didn't really know how to react, because that was the first time that not only did I heard something like that, but I was kind of old enough to comprehend what she was saying to me. I knew it wasn't right, but I also knew she was an adult, and I kind of had to respect her, there. And so I didn't know how to I didn't know where to take the conversation. But hearing that from her at that time was very disturbing and bothersome to me. I just didn't know how to react, because it was in the moment. I had never experienced anything like it before, but something that I'll never forget, going forward.
For sure. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about what microaggressions are, but for the audience, keep that moment in mind, because that definitely is a perfect example of that. Lisa, Chene, any experiences that call out to you, or maybe your first conversations with your family about race?
Yeah, so I have two stories. It's funny because Mike was talking. It takes that aha moment. I'm sure we've had many experiences throughout childhood, early adulthood, and I too. It was when I was an adult working in a corporate world is when I got my first aha, like, here's racism, right? But I'd rather share with you a little bit about my first conversation, if I may, because I think you said either one, right?
Yep.
And I think this is relevant because I'm a mom. My son is now 24. But at the time, back in 2013, he was only 15 and a half. And my son was so excited to take his DMV road test. It was like, okay, mom, I'm going to pass. And, I'm sitting in the background like, yeah, he is going to pass. And here comes that moment where we will have that talk. The DMV license is when, these kids feel like, oh, I've got my independence. And, they get this privilege to drive. So, my son returns back with the examiner and he's all excited and he leaps from the car. So I know he passed, and he gets in my car and I look at him and I say, congratulations, but now I need to teach you how to get pulled over. And he goes, Mom, what do you mean? And I go, I need to teach you how to come home safe. And so I said to him, you get pulled over, your cell phone goes on, you either try to reach me, you put it on record, and your hands go out the window. And I think for my son, although we've had to talk in our family numerous times, but I think that was his aha moment where he actually realized that he was a Black male, he wore locks in his hair, and that he would be subjected to facing racism, and he may not even have done anything, right? So it was a moment where, yes, we celebrate, because I think we should celebrate every milestone, everything that we do in this world. But it was a reality that I needed him to tap into so that he would come home safe.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what's so fascinating is that there's so many families that don't realize that those types of conversations have to happen at the same time that you're celebrating. Right. And it can be a downer, but it's a matter of life and death for you and taking care of your son. And I know we have a lot of young people on the call right now that may have had this conversation recently with their own parents. Chene, what about you and your experience?
I grew up in Texas, and I think similar to Mike, even though I was in a bubble of my own, I'm the first generation born and raised here in the US. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria. So we sort of had this insular household.
Let's go. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, Nigeria, what's up?
Side note, Coach Mike Brown was the coach of Team Nigeria, so shout out.
Man.
Hey, we trying to come on over, so fingers crossed.
Yes, come on. My bad.
Oh man, no, that's great. That's great. Coach Mike, you the best for that. I could put what? How did I miss that? That just made my day right there. So growing up in Houston, Texas, to a Nigerian family that was very insular, the closest relatives we had were my dad's siblings in New Jersey. So Texas to New Jersey, and then everyone else is back home in Nigeria. So a lot of what we did was together. And being in Houston, Texas, I went to a private elementary school and for sometimes middle school. And I don't think I understood fully what race meant. I think looking back, per se, when I was a child, because you have that youthful innocence. Looking back when I was a child, I always felt different. I felt other because I was in a Catholic private school from 2nd to 6th grade, and I was the only Black person in that environment. And so it was not necessarily, oh, you're Black. It's more like, oh, you would want to play sports, right? Mm-hmm. Or, oh, you're tall and is your dad home? It was not necessarily what it seems to be when we think of race, Black or white issues. And I think that was hard for me looking back. I was like, oh, my experience in school was not just, being othered, but it was also like you get to those microaggressions or those passive aggressions where people say things not knowing what they mean because they're in a society that has created these stereotypes that did not apply to my life. And so I thought it was interesting as I grew older, being the only Black girl in the classroom for most of my youth. Now I'm like, oh, are these people really my friends when they come to me with, these types of comments? Or are they just naive and not knowing what race really is, considering I'm Black in Houston, Texas, and do play sports where people might assume things. And so I think not knowing as a young person, trying to understand it yourself while also reading your scenarios and surroundings, that's one experience. And then I get to high school and I transfer to a public, I go to a public high school where it was amazing. We had so much more diversity. At that time, I was, state champion, playing basketball, volleyball, student council, you name it. But I think it sort of hit me really, over the head when I went to go play in this more rural country area near our high school. And when I went to play volleyball there, the entire student section was predominantly, if not all, white. My team was all white. I was the only Black athlete, and I'm not gonna lie, I was the best. I was the middle blocker. I was getting kills. Like,
we can imagine.
I'm not gonna lie. I can't even say it in any other way. Like, yeah, whatever. But it was tough. It sort of screamed racism, and those issues reared its head in a way that I never expected. When the student section, when I was doing well, would just start yelling HGH, which is like steroids, or go back to Africa. That's what I had to deal with. And when that happened, I was like, whoa, that was the make or break moment. All my teammates just looked mortified. They were looking at me and they're waiting to see what I would do. And in that moment, that's when you just sort of realize, and it tests your character and reveals who you are. And I just, kept my emotions to myself. I finished the game. We left, we got on the bus, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, for those who may not be aware of what that experience is to be Black and young, now you know what it's like on a grand scale. And so I think that sort of taught empathy amongst my teammates. I don't even think the students got condemned, but those years of being other and different, you never really realize the grand scenarios that can be exposed based on people's limited mindsets. And so that was my big, my first teaching moment, not just for me, but for my teammates, for the school that we represent, for the school that we compete against. This is something that should not be tolerated. And it's tough when it happens through you.
For sure. And I know, as I mentioned before, we do have middle schoolers and high schoolers on this call. And I want you all to listen to these stories and realize if you're experiencing these things, you listen to how young Chene was and how young Mike was, like it's very normal to experience these things and have questions about it. And if you're not someone that has experienced it personally, be empathetic enough to realize some of your teammates and your classmates and the people that you're going to school with are experiencing these things. And they may need your help in trying to navigate and understand what is happening here. Why do I feel othered? Why do I feel as if I can't stand up for myself, or it might be inappropriate to stand up for myself? And that is that level of empathy that we're talking about. And Shanae, I'll go ahead and say thank you, because you have foreshadowed a little bit of the things that we're going to talk about today in those stereotypes, in those microaggressions. But I appreciate that for that moment of reflection. We know that when we reflect on things, and hindsight is 2020, and we're able to process how things impacted us, it does lead to actions. And so I want to talk a little bit about, particularly within the realm of being an athlete and being in the sports world, with Mike and Shanae, the things that you guys have been able to do as you reflect on those moments and how they impacted you now as adults, and now with the platform, what you've been able to do with that. So Mike, I'll start with you. Can you talk a little bit about how the NBA and specifically the Warriors have been able to use their platform to address social inequities, that some of the things that we've been already talking about?
Well, I'll start off with just speaking on our head coach. I mean, our head coach is a guy who for sure doesn't have to speak up about anything, and Steve Kerr, but he uses his platform in a way that most others won't. And because he does do that, and he's a white male that has achieved at a high level, that has a lot of respect from others around, I think it touches other white males, especially more so than if I'm going to say something or if I'm going to do something. And so we need guys like him and another good friend of mine, and Greg Popovich, to stand up and initiate or help us initiate change. One of the things that I did during the pandemic, being in the league as long as I have, this is year 30 for me. There are a lot of young African-American assistant coaches that want to be head coaches, or even video guys that want to be assistant coaches or move up in the ranks. And this is a tough field, like any other, to navigate your way through. The tough part about our field is there's only 30 teams, and so your opportunities are obviously limited. And so the one thing with me being through a lot, working my way up starting as an unpaid intern, an African American that didn't play in the league, but working my way up to being a 3-time head coach and experiencing some of the things I've experienced, I felt like I could give back, and I can give back with, my knowledge. I can give back with my time. I can give back with anything to help these young brothers and sisters, because we had a couple of girls on the call, ladies on the call, raise up and be aware of how to possibly make that next move upwards. And so I started a Zoom call. And at its highest point, and again, this is during the pandemic, a Zoom call for African-American, again, assistant coaches and video guys and scouts and all that, because as an African-American head coach, you have a pretty strong voice.
Sure.
Your head coach. And so you can use that in a lot of different ways. But as an assistant coach or anything, you gotta watch what you say, because you don't want to, possibly get terminated before you reached your dream or whatever. And you don't always know how to navigate your way to the top. So we started the Zoom call, and we talked about all different types of issues, from basketball to racial injustices in basketball to racial injustices around the world. And this even happened during the tumultuous times that we've had these past, like obviously a couple of years we were on Zoom calls. At the highest point, I think there were over 150 coaches from the NBA, G League, college, and we even had a couple of high school and overseas coaches. And I'd bring guest speakers on. Steve Kerr came on. But I want to point out, it's easy to find out. You could see what the Warriors are doing. They're doing a lot with their platform, and I applaud, starting with Joe Lacob and Peter Gruber, our owners, for allowing the organization and pushing the organization to do that. But this is something behind the scenes that nobody knows about. I brought Bob Meyer on one time, and it was great, because you know, it's just like when Steve was on, here it is. You got, you know, 150 black faces looking at you like, okay, you on now, hey, hi, you know, we gonna come right at you. And to those guys' credit, they answered everything truthfully, honestly, and right away. And one of the questions that was posed to Bob, or one of the challenges that was posed to Bob was, hey, we know that there's not a ton of opportunities for African Americans, especially in the front office. Now you see a lot of coaches and player development guys, but we're talking about GMs, assistant GMs. And he goes, what do you think about that? Bob agreed. And so then the next person said, well, what do you envision yourself doing anything about it? And
Now what?
Bob said, I'm all ears. And so in a nutshell, basically we said, hey, you know, create some avenues or pathways for youngsters to get an opportunity to see what that side of the basketball business is about, so we can have more people wanting to go that route instead of just the playing route or the coaching route. And to Bob's credit, he started he might kill me for saying this, but he started an initiative or a program, and we currently have 3 African Americans that are interns that are interning. They rotate between the front office, his area, and the coaching staff and the medical staff, so they get a taste of it all. And that he put that in place this year. And so to his credit, again, Bob, I applaud you for stepping up to the plate. But and they go through a process of vetting, you know, the students in need and the students that won't have an opportunity to get anything like this at all going forward because their dad wasn't this or their mom wasn't this or they had the money to be able to. No. This is disadvantaged or underprivileged students that are interested in this, and they come and do a full internship, experience all of the departments on the basketball side. And that's something that he's going to continue to have implemented every year that he's involved. But little things like that are what make me so proud of the Warriors organization, because it's not publicized. It is now, you know, but it's not publicized. It's the people that we have trying to step up to the plate individually and as an organization to make things better for everybody.
I love that notion of leaving the door open so that others can follow behind you, and the action, right? Being able to follow up on the things that you're saying.
The action.
When you talk about a league that does that walks the walk and talks the talk, I don't know if there's a better league that demonstrates that than the WNBA. And I will just go ahead and give you guys your props as being the league that really started it all in the midst of that 2020 movement. Shanae, can you talk a little bit about what that was like to be in the midst of that with your teammates and your colleagues, and what that experience was like really for you as an activist and having to be a voice in the midst of that? Oh, we got you on mute, girl. It's okay. The pandemic's still real.
Of course. Sure, yeah. So I think we all know like the notable athlete activists. And I think that over the course of 2020, we realized that in multiple regards, not just in sports, but in also life, we tend to omit Black women from the narrative. Yet, you know, in my league, in my experience in the WNBA, we're not new to activism. We're not new to advocacy. We're not new to community empowerment. We're true to all those things. It just, the circumstances of 2020 brought our consistencies to light in a way that the world finally recognized. And what I mean by that is that, you know, a couple years prior to 2020, we even, you know, in Minnesota, I believe it was Philando Castile, that situation of circumstance, we incurred fines as a union, and then also the teams that played in the WNBA finals that year incurred fines just to protest police brutality during the playoffs. And the league was not at the point to have those conversations and mobilize in the way that we saw in 2020 that it all worked together. That was a couple years prior when a lot of people were potentially going to criticize us for doing something like that. We got fined as, you know, teams for choosing to make a stand. And then a couple years later in 2020, now we're celebrated for doing the thing that we've consistently done. And so I think the circumstances of 2020 just put a highlight on how consistent Black female athletes in particular have been to, and also how loyal we've been to our community and our culture. And people always ask why. And it's because we know what's at stake. We have no choice but to play for the love of the game and also be in the community itself. We are not the NBA, no offense, Coach Brown and everyone else. Like, we're not the NBA where if you come to a game, you're hoping that you can wave at your favorite star. We're in the stands, shaking hands, kissing babies, going to events. That's how our league has to grow. So we were aware of everything that was happening in the community consistently for 25 years. We just last year celebrated our 25th anniversary. And so when 2020 happened and social justice happened, we already knew exactly where our community stood. We understood that we have to raise our voices for our people at the time, no matter who that it could be for a woman. And I think, in our instance, we were playing the season for Breonna Taylor, but it could also be for a man. It could be for someone that is, oppressed, whether it's due to religion or sexual orientation. We just know what is right or wrong, and we stand together. Even if we don't agree, we understand that standing together is the most important thing. And so time and time again in that 2020 season, you saw us stand together and speak in media availability about the issues that mattered most, using our platform of the game to create that conversation. For me, I was not in the bubble, and that was the hardest thing to, not experience, because it was a once in a lifetime experience. And I wasn't in the bubble because, we only had 20 days to get ready, and the way this body's set up, I'm not as young as I used to be. And so I had to sit out, but then I work for ESPN and I'm on the Players Association, and my sister's the president of the Players Association. So you know how that goes. So I knew exactly what was going on. And my personal role was to amplify the messaging that was happening, not just in the WNBA, but also in the NBA, because when the Milwaukee Bucks decided to postpone the game and, sit out, the WNBA was making those same choices. It was not just the NBA in the narrative. We can't omit women from it. It was the WNBA as well. It was the WNBA that wore shirts to support our Reverend Warnock, who is now Senator Warnock. And the previous election really changed the future of what we talk about and experience right now. And that all started with T-shirts that raised $250,000 in campaign dollars that got, Reverend Warnock on air more and created some headlines, and then bam, the campaign takes a different set of life, breathes new life. So there were so many instances that I can go to. I executive produced a documentary called 144 that captured the whole season. So if you want to see it, go watch that on ESPN Plus. But I think at the crux of it is that finally women, especially women of color, were brought to the center, and people actually cared to hear what we have to say. The challenge is to keep that same energy, because we speak when we know we have to, and it seems like we always have to. The question is, will society be ready to listen and hear and apply those things that we say?
And I mean, that is a perfect demonstration of protest town halls, now what? When we're saying that, it's not just in those moments that you can be activist, that you can be vocal, that you can help, that you can make a change. It's all those instances outside that you guys found a way to keep your message consistent, to keep your empathy and your care for your neighbors consistent. So the now what was beyond those big grand scale moments where everyone could see it and everyone could celebrate it and cheer it on. What else are we still doing for our neighbors? And are we still listening? Are we still looking to help each other out? I want to continue the conversation. I know we've already talked about stereotypes, and I think everyone on this call, regardless of age, is pretty familiar with stereotypes. I can talk about, I was actually not born in the United States. I was originally born in Paris, France, and my parents are Guinean, West African. And I remember coming up in school, and everyone, when I would say that my parents were Guinean, they just assumed that all African people live in huts with wild animals and that we were all in poverty. And Shanae, you can tell us from Nigeria, and Mike Brown, you can tell us from Nigeria. Definitely not in poverty everywhere we go, okay? So it was just like, that was a stereotype, right? It was a generalized, standardized belief that of a common group. And usually that group is a marginalized group, meaning people of color, meaning women, people that identify on the LGBTQIA spectrum. These are marginalized groups that we typically have like, this is what I think of when I think about that group. So we know stereotypes. Microaggressions is where it gets a little bit nuanced. And we talked about this a little bit before with Mike's story about his high school girlfriend and what Chiney experienced while playing volleyball in high school. Lisa, I want to talk to you a little bit about what do you think creates stereotypes and microaggressions? Like, where do these things stem from? And I'd love to hear what your thoughts of like what experience did you have with your microaggressions in your corporate job? Because I know you didn't go into that in detail.
Yeah, and and I'm glad you brought that up because our youth, high school, middle school, they will come into this corporate world. And, you think about it, as much as we progress, there'll always be that space where someone will have either a corporate knee on your neck where you can't breathe or just in your career path. And it happened to me. It definitely happened to me. Here I was in my career, top of my game. And I'm like, yeah, go Lisa, go Lisa. And there was a promotion that was set to come. And my colleagues, everyone knew that this promotion would be for me. And that celebration came to a screeching halt when I was told, off the record that they're looking for someone that doesn't look like you. And there was another colleague, blue eyes, blonde hair, inexperienced, mind you, that they felt they should put in this space because the people that they were going after would trust her more than they would trust me because the color of my skin. So it exists, it's out there. And I'm glad that we're having, moments like this where we can take something like the George Floyd and not just make it a moment, but make it a movement. And that now what? It continues. But some of the things that I think about when you talk about stereotype, and I think it comes from an experience of cultures, just allowing, just one bad apple to define us all. And I don't think that's fair. I think about some of the things that are passed down from generation to generation. And, me as a Black woman, it pains me when I hear people go, oh, there goes the angry Black woman. And I think that is not a fair statement because there's another statement that says, well, I'm going to use that HE double hockey sticks. We have youth on the phone, has no fury like a woman scorned. Now that's acceptable. That saying is acceptable, but that's too as a woman. But when you think about angry Black women, a Black woman does not have that safe space to express her emotions without being labeled. And I don't think that's fair. That inability to view a person for their unique self, it puts you in that negative mindset and it prevents you from growing. So I think when you look about, you think about different examples that we may hear or think about, I think change comes from not only within ourselves, but people that we're in groups with. There was a group of kids and their parents, and I had them all close their eyes. And I said, I want to give you a description of a male, right? His pants are too big for him. They're sagging below. He has this big chain around his neck. And I want you to tell me your first thought, right? And of course they went to the Black male. And to me, that thought alone was such an association of what they were led to believe. And I said to him, that same Black male that you're thinking about, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're peacemakers. I said, when I have that thought, I think of enslavement. I think of us not having a proper pair of pants or belts and chains. So you can't really just look at the old way or what you used to seeing or hearing, and you label us all. So in spite of, all that people may think about the youth, and I say this to our youth, don't ever stop being who you are with all the stereotypes that will come across you or microaggression. Remember who you are, believe in you are who you are, because in spite of it all, our ancestors, they went through it. And I feel like they knew how to turn a window into a door. They didn't get trapped in someone's thinking. They said, I'm better than that, I'm more than that. And that's the spirit that I'd like our youth to move into, because unfortunately, no matter how much, we can always make a difference. I don't feel like we're stuck here. I feel that we have a lot of work to do, and the more work that we need to do, there's always going to be that one person that come behind and try to take you 2 steps forward. But for the youth that are on this call, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. And I don't want you to feel trapped where you are, and know that you can make a difference. Voice your voice, be who you are, because our ancestors went through it and you were living proof of what they've come through. So yes, it's out there. It's in high school, it's in middle school, it's in your neighborhoods. And when Mike said, about his neighborhood and he didn't realize it, a lot of things I started thinking about, it's in the corporate world. It's here, but we can make a difference together.
What I hear you say too, especially towards that beginning, inexperience of cultures, right? The fear of the unknown. And so when you don't know something, you'd rather make up something to make yourself feel comfortable with it, right? And that leads into those stereotypes. It leads into the microaggressions, right? Mike's girlfriend's mother thought that she was giving him a compliment by telling him he was different. And it's unintentional. She might have not thought she was offending you, but what does that mean? That is, you're assuming that the rest of my race is not good enough, is poorly dressed, or whatever it is. Same thing with Chanae. I experienced the same thing. I'm 6 feet tall, Black woman, and people always assuming that I played a sport. I did, but that's not the point. You know what I mean? Or even having gone to the schools that I've gone to, people assuming that the only reason I got into those schools or I got to attend was because of sports, right? So those sorts of microaggressions do exist on different levels. And we always have to remember, where does this come from? Why are we saying this to this person? Are we saying this because we think they'll be complimented by this? How much do we know about the culture or the person that we're talking to? So I really appreciate you sharing that, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, it goes to that treat people as you want to be treated. The sad truth is, with microaggression, many folks don't even realize that the statements or behavior are inappropriate. I just want to share a small story with myself. It's a personal awakening moment for me. My brother is openly gay and he's married to the love of his life. And because I witnessed what he went through with acceptance, and back then it's like you had to be secretly gay, where it's not as accepted. I found myself that whenever I would be in a crowd or with people that I knew that were of the LGBT community, instantly I'd start telling the story about my brother, and I would place emphasis on, and his husband, because I felt I needed to create this safe space, where in fact I was part of the problem. I was not part of the solution. That was not a necessity. I needed to just listen and learn and not feel like I needed to be the fixer, right? So, and I say that to say, you have to be cautious of what you say, because like you just said, if you don't know what to say, you wind up saying something you shouldn't say.
Oh, that's a great example. Think about that when you're talking to your classmates and your peers, our students on the call. I want to keep it moving as well regarding the Black woman experience. You touched on this in your when you were talking about microaggressions and things you've experienced in the corporate world. But Chanae, I also want to ask you, why is it so important that women, particularly women of color and Black women, not give up when it comes to their education and their careers, and keep pushing forward? Why is that so important when we talk about this world where we're trying to work on racial equity?
It's interesting because since we love television and we love content, we tend to see the headlines, we tend to see the home runs, we tend to see the people that are, doing amazing things, where in reality, it's the little things all done collectively that will actually turn the tide. And when I think about, like basically my experiences when it comes to aggressions or not, it's not like, okay, you're gonna be, because I work on ESPN as a broadcaster, along with playing in the WNBA. Oh, you have to go and convince all the people with what's your thoughts. Like, you have to just help people understand. I'm like, no, it's not necessarily that. It's hoping that people are open to hearing what we have to say. As women, especially Black women, I always tell people, they see you, they judge you before they hear you and understand you. So if you come with an open heart, and just as Lisa was mentioning, and maybe come from a listening perspective and realize that maybe my point of view does not always need to be prominent, you'll start realizing different perspectives that are all valuable. And more importantly, realizing that we're more alike than we are different. And once you have that foundation, the tide moves forward. And I always tell people, like, it's not necessarily the big things that people want to focus on. You know, it's how do you interact when someone, you know, something's going wrong. Like, oh, and it's not just, you know, social justice and racism, it can be sexism. There's one woman in the room. Are you letting her speak? Have you realized that naturally it's not an environment where maybe everyone understands that her voice should be protected in the space because it's not been built in society for her opinion to be brought forth first? Do we have that awareness? Do we have an awareness that women are more likely to be interrupted than men? Do we have the awareness that Black women in corporate CEO positions, when we say that it's the 1% of the 1%, then it's another 1%. And so when we look at people's experiences and journeys, just to get to where you are now, you've already won. You don't have to go and do these major home runs that you think you see on social media or television. It's the little things to me that really, really actually move mountains. Yes. I've learned that through, I can go on and try to build this big argument about how we need to care and listen and take care of one another. But are you willing to have a conversation with someone that does not look like you? Something simple as that is super relatable for everyone. That to me is more important than a platform or going out there and trying to say, look at me, I'm doing this for a cause. Are you doing the little things each and every day that create comfortable surroundings? And that's what I always tell, young people. That's where your power is in the minutia. And that's basically been my perspective. I think lastly, I'll just say, being a Black woman in the space, I've always said that your existence is the resistance. You don't have to feel like you have to do these major things. You're already probably overqualified for what you do. Right. You don't have to feel like you have to keep trying to supersede expectations. The fact that you've made it through is already the win. Now, what do you do while you're there? You try to find ways to, like you said, make that window a door and make that door freaking a whole building that people can run through, So just existing in a space that is not necessarily built for you, existing in a space where you might be other, existing in a space where maybe people are, doing things in a stereotypical way, but you still wake up and you still go back and you still treat people with respect. Showing up, that's it's not easy, but it's so worth it because I found now I got okay, people with me, you know what I mean? People with me on my journey. People are coming that understand. It just takes you mentioned earlier, the empathy and the willingness to be uncomfortable and realize that by you being uncomfortable, you're finally doing something that is actually right probably for someone else.
Ooh, that is why you do not give up on your careers, on whatever it is you're trying to do. The little things will build up and will make an impact more than you can see right now. I love that. Thank you, Shanae. That is amazing. Existence is the resistance, or I want to get that right. What is it? Your resistance is your existence?
Yeah. So it's basically, your existence is the resistance.
I love it. So mental note right here. Thank you for that. Let's finish up. I know we've got 10 minutes here, and I want to get some thoughts around the Black experience, and particularly how people on this call, our colleagues, these students can help each other and themselves experience the Black experience. So Mike, I'll go to you. How can people show up for their Black friends, their Black colleagues, schoolmates, et cetera? How can they help them out?
The biggest thing is to listen, and to actively listen. It's not just being there, but try to be engaged when somebody's talking to you, asking questions, try to get a better understanding or a better feel. And if you can do that, in my opinion, it's going to start dialogue off the right way. It's going to uplift anybody that's around you trying to take that next step in life. And so I always encourage, and that's part of the reason why I started the Zoom call, is not just for me to actively listen to others, because everybody was telling me, hey, Mike, man, we appreciate you doing that.
By the way, that's so amazing what you have done. That safe space, yes, therapy, but go ahead, sorry.
And you know what, and I hate, I'm a little selfishly, but I'm learning, I'm getting something, what I'm saying? I'm listening, I'm able to talk and express myself, but I don't have all the answers. So, so for me, it was a huge endeavor from the standpoint that I grew a lot, obviously organizing and all that, but sitting there and listening to everybody's stories. And not only that, I had guys, especially during the George Floyd deal. We had some guys on there ready to go, they want to go off. They want to express themselves. They wanted to speak out and act out to a certain degree, and so to have that space was beneficial for myself and for them too. And so it wasn't any magic thing or anything. It was just about me wanting to listen to what guys had to say, and not just me, but having the next guy listen, and so on and so forth. Because again, when you have that type of support, you can conquer mountains.
Wow. Yes. Active listening, being there, creating a space for your friends, and maybe for yourself as well. Lisa, what do you think about that? How can we show up for our Black friends, our colleagues, and schoolmates?
Yeah, and I love the theme is listen. You have to listen to learn, not to respond or defend. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak so that you can really understand someone. And as people are speaking, if there is something you don't understand, make sure that you're asking the question intelligently and not, from a point of, I just want to show that I know more than you. You want to celebrate other people's uniqueness without feeling like you're threatened or I'm in competition. Because if you really want to know someone, sit down and really listen to them and learn from their mistakes. Be authentic in your quest to understand their struggles, understand their successes, and allow them to celebrate. It's okay to celebrate. The Black experience to me is one to be celebrated. We've come a long way, and we're going to continue to go in that way. It's in our DNA. One of the things that I always say is to be Black and proud is a spectacular thing that we are. But our similarities as a human race, that's what makes us a whole. So you have to understand that I may not walk or talk or sing or dance or eat the way you do. I'm uniquely designed, and this is who I am. Celebrate that with me. So, again, that listen to me is key. And that's in all aspects of your work, your walk. As students, we have to listen to our teachers, and there's a reason we listen to our teachers, right? So guys, just try to listen and learn from one another.
Active listening, authentic listening. Absolutely love that. Sinead, close us out. What else can we do within with our Black schoolmates and colleagues, and then also within our spaces? I know you talked a lot about the WNBA listening to their communities. What can we do within our communities and our schools to help our Black colleagues and peers?
I think the best thing we can do is continue to educate ourselves. Because, and this might be like way too end game for maybe this demographic, but I'd be remiss not to just say the best way we can create change is by owning our own narratives. Ownership is the ultimate goal. Owning your voice, owning your own opportunities. Now, I will preface this with saying that you can't let your side hustle be your main hustle until you got to the point where you have that freedom. Meaning, you can't say, I want to do this and not educate yourself, build up the requisite experience so that you've given yourself the best chance to succeed at what you really want to do. Which means educating yourself as much as you can. If you have a passion, follow that passion. For me, my passion is basketball. For everyone, our passion has been through the world of sports. But here, you have the corporate experience. You have the coaching experience. You have the player and broadcast experience. And we're the same. We're the same here
Right.
as well. So sports has been our passion. Now, what do you do with that passion? You try to find educated ways for you to create change within that. And so I think if I am a young person trying to find my way, I soak up as much information from people in your life that are willing to help you succeed. It could be your teacher, it could be your coach, it could be your principal, it could be your pastor, it could be your best friend, it could be someone you aspire to that you watch on YouTube or TikTok, whatever y'all watch. Like literally someone that helps feed your soul. Keep educating yourself on ways to improve, and then you'll find yourself surrounding yourself with people that think the same way, and you're gonna put yourself in a good environment. You know, we are not products of, you know, individualism. Like it took, the phrase is, it took a village for all us to get here. People that supported us in our dreams and people that pushed us to work for them. And so I would just say, you know, educating yourself as much as you can on what you want to do and what you'd love to do, and do the little things that can be, that can really create change. Like a simple thing is voting, right? You care about something, maybe you can't convince everyone, but you know that I'm educated on an issue, I care about this issue, let's vote. Maybe it is inspired by Coach Brown, creating a Zoom meeting. Maybe you're in school and you have a group of, huh? Oh, sorry, my fault. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? If I can just quickly piggyback on that education piece, you know, to our educators, our children are with you most of their awakening hours. Teach them limitless. Like they're sponges. They want to absorb. So I challenge our teachers. These kids that are on these young adults that are on this Zoom right now with us, they are our future. They're the game changers, and I'm believing in you as our youth, that you are going to make a difference. And our educators, they're with you, please.
Yeah, and I'll lastly say, like, a lot of people know that I probably play in the WNBA and I probably work on ESPN. Like, that's probably the bio, right? But people probably didn't know that I was student body president in high school and founded Civil Rights Club and graduated from Stanford with an international relations major. And I'm fortunate to play in the WNBA with 143 other players that all predominantly, pretty much, let's say a majority of us have our degrees. And so when you look at, oh, this WNBA player is speaking on an issue, she's not speaking on it just because she can. She's speaking on it because it's all these experiences of sports experience, educational experience, and even, you know, knowing what it feels like to be left behind or thought of last or stereotypes. That's why you're seeing people speak. I think it's just finding those pathways where if you do the right things, you educate yourself, you surround yourself with the right people, you're gonna find what your purpose is, and then you'll be unstoppable.
Wow. I'm just trying to recap for everyone: active listening, authentic listening, educating yourself. These are the ways that you can help support your Black teammates, your Black schoolmates, your Black peers, your Black students, right? We're talking about the Black experience as a part of this Beyond 28 campaign. Thank you, Chase, for supporting this conversation to continue on beyond just February. And that's very, very important when we're talking about these things that Mike and Lisa and Shanae have touched on. Don't just do this right now because it's on a pedestal, because it's on a platform, because it's important, and because it's part of the lesson plan. Right? Let's extend way beyond that. We are at time, and I cannot thank you all enough. The gems dropped, okay? So much gems dropped, and so much knowledge and wisdom and empathy shared today. And I know I speak for everyone on the call that we're just grateful for your time. So thank you all for attending Protests and Town Halls Now What webinar presented by Chase. And thank you, Mike Brown, Shanae Aguimike, Lisa Stevens, for joining us and sharing everything that you know. And again, big thanks to Chase for hosting this. We know that Black History Month is way bigger than just February, and that's why we are grateful for Beyond 28. I encourage all of you to educate yourselves, to listen to those around you, and to just continue to build up that empathy and understanding so that one day protests and town halls on this matter will not be a thing. So I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.